Hello, my name is Alejandra Rocha and I'm going to be presenting a timeline about the history of English language teaching. As Saul Mercy once said, a language cannot be taught, one can only create conditions for learning to take place. And we will see in the further pages that this is a goal that has been pursued during many years in the ELT community. We're going to begin talking about the 15th to the 18th century. During and before this time, the classical languages such as Greek and Latin were the main focus on teaching, and their practice was confined to the analysis of grammar, translation works, and rhetoric. It was also during this time, and despite of English being the official language in England, that the predominant language to learn in Europe as foreign language were those two, because they were used in higher education, religion, politics, and businesses. The decline of Latin language began when, as the study of Latin and Greek grammar became popular, students and teachers discovered that the grammar in the Latin used then and the one used in classical texts was not the same, situation that caused that Latin abandon its status of lingua franca in the following years, and it was labeled as degenerated or vulgar. During these years and the following centuries, children entered the school in England, and they were initially given a rigorous instruction to Latin through the classical method, which later became to be known as the grammar translation method. This method ruled language teaching, and it was based on learning grammar rules, translation, and practicing writing samples. However, as modern language gained importance in Europe, as a result of political changes, they entered the curriculum of European schools, but they were taught using the grammar translation method too. In the following decades, the grammar translation method became to be known as a not so effective method, and ELT theories and approaches emerged. Also, a great impact was made by the scientific study of the language learning and the psychology behind it. Now, we can talk about the 19th century, when, according to Bonilla, the main reason why someone wanted to learn a foreign language was because of the literature existing in that language and/or benefit from the mental discipline and intellectual development. So, we can totally relate the learning of a foreign language to a status of the elite. As mentioned before, after the grammar translation method began to decline, many new methods emerged, and the first that we will mention is the natural method by Xavier, which he used in a school in 1860s. On it, the mother tongue was not used. After that, we can point out the Berlitz method, which key elements were that it was immersive, goal-oriented, and the present practice and perform approach. An important fact of this century is that the International Phonetic Association was established in 1886, institution that influenced the upcoming teaching approaches by prioritizing speech over grammar, and the participation of linguists into the ELT became significant, beginning with Henry Sweets and his direct method, which main focus was on pronunciation. As the 20th century began, language teaching was characterized by the frequent change and innovation and by the development of sometimes competing language teaching ideologies. As Richard and Rogers mentioned, during this century a vast number of research findings impacted ELT, which resulted in the development of new methods and approaches. For organizational purposes, we will first talk about the influences and then the innovation that those influences propitiated. We will begin with the creation of the British Council in 1934 in response to global instability due to financial depression, the rise of communism, and fascism. Noam Chomsky's theory of transformational generative grammar gave us greater insight into language learning versus language acquisition. In 1971, Del Hymes published his book on communicative competence, which came to revolutionize second language and foreign language teaching when presenting the definition of communicative competence, and it became a goal for ELT. Krashen presented his work where he deepened into language acquisition and learning, the theory of second language acquisition. Also, in 1993, Garden proposed the theory of multiple intelligences in general education, but it was later applied to language teaching, leading to the conception of learner-centeredness. Some of the methods and approaches that arose from such contributions were Otto Jespersen, where he talked about the importance of prioritizing learner-centered discovery. The oral method by Harold Palmer, which emphasized phonetic training. With the outbreak of World War II came the audiolingual method, mostly focused on pronunciation. The competent-based instruction has its beginnings in 1986 with the reformation of USA education and the total physical response by James Asher, which mentioned that a successful adult second language learning was a parallel process to the first language acquisition. The Silent Way in 1976 relied on cognitive arguments, while the Suggestopedia in 1979 used relaxation as a means to retain new information. We also had the content-based instruction in 1987 and strategies-based instruction in 1990 by O'Malley and Chamont, where they classify language learning strategies into distinct categories. Last but not least, the communicative language teaching, which arose from the need to foster students' ability to communicate. Then, the 21st century. During these last years, it has been emphasized that language learning, teaching, are dynamic, fluid, mutable processes. There is nothing fixed about them. In the article Current Trends in ELT Around the Globe, Karn presented a list of several key trends, among which we could mention networking, grammaring, conferencing, rethinking aim, reflective practice, and student-centeredness.